Assalamu alaikum and welcome to Current Affairs, a fortnightly glance with Ahmed Naqvi. नाज़रीन, आज की इस एपिसोड में हम रिसेंटली एग्रीड एक एग्रीमेंट था जिसका नाम है AUKUS, which is an acronym for Australia, United Kingdom and United States. This agreement is meant to provide nuclear submarine and related technologies to Australia. और नाज़रीन, इस एग्रीमेंट के हवाले से मीडिया के अंदर एक मेजर डिबेट शुरू हुई है और इसको कहा जाता है कि इट हैज़ बीन द मोस्ट इम्पॉर्टेंट डेवलपमेंट ऑफ इंडो पैसिफिक रीजन अंडर प्रेसिडेंट बाइडन. इस AUKUS एग्रीमेंट को हम डिफरेंट हवालों से डिस्कस करेंगे और ख़ासकर फोकस करेंगे हाउ दिस एग्रीमेंट हैज़ बीन इम्पैक्टिंग द रीजनल एंड ग्लोबल पॉलिटिक्स. नाज़रीन, ये जो तीन मुल्क हैं, ऑस्ट्रेलिया, यूके एंड यूएस, दे हैव ऑलरेडी बीन पार्टनर्स विद ईच अदर ऑन डिफरेंट सिक्योरिटी इशूज़ एंड पर्टिकुलरली रिलेटेड टू द सिक्योरिटी पार्टनरशिप्स. अगर नाज़रीन आप जानते हो, एक 5 आईज़ का एक इंटेलिजेंस अलायंस सिस्टम मौजूद है ऑलरेडी इस रीजन के अंदर. क्वाड का अलायंस ऑलरेडी मौजूद है. नेटो यूरोप के अंदर एक अलायंस मौजूद है. तो उन अलायंसेस के अंदर ये एक नया एडिशन समझा जाता है और इसकी एक अपनी एक स्ट्रेटेजिक वैल्यू है. हाउएवर ये डिफरेंट इसलिए है बिकॉज इसके अंदर से मिक्स रिएक्शन सामने आ रहे हैं, हमें डिफरेंट स्टेट की तरफ से नज़र आ रहे हैं. So let's start with this idea that AUKUS agreement में है क्या. So under this agreement, US through United Kingdom will provide nuclear submarine technologies to Australia. So in fact, Australia would become the second state of the Indo-Pacific, third state in fact of the Indo-Pacific to have nuclear powered submarine technology. उससे पहले इंडिया के पास है, चाइना के पास है, एंड ऑस्ट्रेलिया विल बी द थर्ड वन. एंड इंटरेस्टिंगली, ऑस्ट्रेलिया विल बी द सेकंड स्टेट आफ्टर ब्रिटेन टू हैव बीन शेयर्ड दिस टेक्नोलॉजी बाय द यूनाइटेड स्टेट्स. और नाज़रीन, यहाँ पे एक और चीज़ बड़ी इंपॉर्टेंट याद रखने वाली है कि ये जो न्यूक्लियर सबमरीन का एग्रीमेंट है, इट इज़ न्यूक्लियर पावर्ड सबमरीन एंड नॉट एन SSBN सबमरीन. इसके अंदर न्यूक्लियर टेक्नोलॉजी इज़ यूज्ड फॉर प्रोपल्जन ऑफ सबमरीन विच हेल्प्स इट स्टे अंडर द वाटर फॉर लॉन्गर पीरियड ऑफ टाइम. और कुछ रिपोर्ट्स ये कहती हैं दैट दिस टेक्नोलॉजी इज शेयर्ड बाय द यूनाइटेड स्टेट्स एंड यूके टू ऑस्ट्रेलिया विल कीप द सबमरीन अंडर द सी फॉर 5 लॉन्ग मंथ्स. बट रिमेंबर दैट ये जो अंडर सी टाइम पीरियड है, ये प्रोलॉन्ग होता है बिकॉज ऑफ न्यूक्लियर प्रोपल्जन. लेकिन इसका मतलब ये नहीं है कि न्यूक्लियर जो फ्यूल इस्तेमाल होता है उसकी लाइफ 5 मंथ है. द लाइफ इज़ फॉर डेकेड्स एंड डेकेड्स, बट बिकॉज यू नीड सम मोर थिंग्स एज वेल. फूड चाहिए है आपको, ऑक्सीजन के इश्यूज आते हैं, तो इट कैन स्टे अंडर द वाटर फॉर 5 लॉन्ग मंथ्स. लेकिन क्या ये सबमरीन न्यूक्लियर मिसाइल लॉन्च कर सकती है एट दिस पॉइंट ऑफ टाइम? नो, इट कैन नॉट. सो नाज़रीन, सवाल ये पैदा होता है कि इस सेंसिटिव टेक्नोलॉजी जो यूएस ने ब्रिटेन के अलावा किसी मुल्क को कभी नहीं दी, वाई यूएस हैज़ बीन विलिंग टू शेयर दिस एग्रीमेंट विद देम, वाई ऑस्ट्रेलिया इज़ विलिंग टू बाय इट, वाई ब्रिटेन इज़ पार्ट ऑफ इट. इसके पीछे स्ट्रेटेजिक थिंकिंग क्या है इस एग्रीमेंट के पीछे? तो नाज़रीन, इसके पीछे 2 मेजर स्ट्रेटेजिक थिंकिंग्स इन्वॉल्व हैं. सबसे प्राइमरी और मेजर जो थिंकिंग है, दैट इज़ कंटेनमेंट ऑफ चाइना. नाज़रीन, हम जानते हैं यूएस ऑलरेडी हैज़ ओपनली डिक्लेयर्ड पॉलिसी ऑफ कंटेनमेंट ऑफ चाइना, particularly in Indo-Pacific region. Australia in the last few years has been a very vocal and public critic of China on different issues, and Britain is historically been bandwagoning the US policy. और हम ये भी देखते हैं कि पिछले जब से बाइडेन प्रेसिडेंट बने हैं, पिछले कुछ अरसे से, he is trying to engage Europeans in Indo-Pacific region as well. So this alliance is primarily meant to achieve the containment of China as a common objective among these three states. लेकिन इसके साथ ही हम एक सेकंड परसेप्शन भी देखते हैं नाज़रीन, और वो ये है कि यूएस बायलैटरली इन्वॉल्व होने के बजाय इट इज़ ट्राइंग टू एंगेज some European powers, and in this case, Great Britain, into Indo-Pacific and containment of China efforts. So he is trying to make the Indo-Pacific a global focus and not just the focus of the United States. अब नाज़रीन, मेन जो डिबेट है हमारी AUKUS के हवाले से, that is on how this agreement impacts the region and the world at large. So नाज़रीन, शुरू करते हैं सबसे पहली और सबसे इम्पोर्टेंट जो रिएक्शन है, जो इम्पैक्ट है ऑन दी फ्रांस. फ्रांस इज़ कंसिडर्ड टू बी द विक्टिम ऑफ AUKUS. फ्रांस में एक फ्रेज़ यूज़ किया जा रहा है उनकी मीडिया के अंदर, दैट इट वाज अ सब स्नब टू फ्रांस. Why? Because before this agreement, Australia had an agreement with France under which Australia was to purchase 30 billion euros of submarines, diesel-propelled submarines from France, and it was one of the largest agreements in the French history. But obviously, when Australia signed this agreement on 15 September, French reacted to that. Their reaction was triggered by the two factors. One, their argument was that France was not consulted by any of the three parties, neither US nor Britain nor Australia, about such a strategic agreement, AUKUS. और नाज़रीन, फ्रांस के स्कॉलर्स और फ्रांस की गवर्नमेंट declared it a stab in the back of French. And they said they have actually worked around France and they have actually hidden their motives, their talks from France for a much longer period of time. And their argument was, this is not how allies are treated. So the secrecy behind this agreement was one of the major concerns in France. And secondly, because their commercial interests were affected by it. This snub by Australia would definitely have economic impacts on France, although not a devastating effects on France, but it would definitely be having an effect on the job creation, economic development and all that, which is essential because there are elections coming up in for the French president next year. So if Australia would have honored the agreement with France, French President Emmanuel Macron could have used it as a part of his election campaign next year. So नाज़रीन, ये दो जो मेन आर्गूमेंट हैं, they actually are the reason why French reacted to it. But according to some Western scholars, and particularly the British government and others, France has overreacted. And some even suggested that this overreaction was for political reasons, because President Macron had to show to the public that he is very concerned about their interest. And secondly, they say this overreaction was to expect a better bargain, a better concession from these parties to France. So they wanted to extract maximum benefits out of this adversity that they faced. नाज़रीन, दूसरा मेजर जो फ्रांस पे इम्पैक्ट आया, दैट इज़ इट्स स्टैंडिंग इन द यूरोप वाज क्वेश्चन्ड. और स्कॉलर्स ये कहते हैं दैट दिस फ्रेंच रिएक्शन हैज़ एक्चुअली sown the seeds of long-term divisions within Europe and the transatlantic divisions. European-American alliance, the European-Britain alliance is likely to be greatly affected in the longer term. Although, few days back, the French president has talked with the US President Biden, and they're likely to meet in October. at the eve of G20 meeting. And during that telephonic conversation, both states have agreed to expand French role in Indo-Pacific, and Americans have shared their views that France is an important state that cannot be ignored. नाज़रीन, दूसरा मेजर इम्पैक्ट जो इस AUKUS एग्रीमेंट का आ रहा है, दैट इज़ ऑन चाइना. Although initially this agreement was meant to contain China, but the focus of the discussion shifted from China towards France because of the French reaction. नाज़रीन, चाइनीज़ को कंटेन करने के हवाले से US has been consistently pursuing the policy to contain China for over a decade now. Under President Biden, we see more proactive foreign policy approach on his part, and as this has been evidenced from the fact that he traveled to Europe, met with the NATO, met with the G7, proposed B3W, Build Back Better World. So he is taking certain global initiatives to contain Chinese. This agreement will enhance the position and the power of Australia in Indo-Pacific, which can be used to contain China, particularly in the South China Sea region. And secondly, and very importantly, the European involvement in Indo-Pacific will also be strengthened by it. Some scholars even suggested that the purpose of involving Britain was to create a race in Europe to follow suit and help the United States in containment of China in Indo-Pacific. Otherwise, they are going to lose the US interest over here. Nazneen, this has been expressed by the Chinese official reaction to the AUKUS agreement as well. Chinese officials have called this agreement as irresponsible alliance, an irresponsible agreement, because it is likely to fuel more tensions. And this is also possible that in near future, China might be more aggressive, more proactive in the Indo-Pacific region, particularly in the South China Sea, as a reaction to this policy. Some Western scholars suggested that China is nervous about this AUKUS agreement. But obviously, nervousness of China will be a greatly threat to this region. थर्ड इम्पैक्ट नाज़रीन जो हम देखते हैं, जो थर्ड मेजर कंसर्न है, वो है आसियान स्टेट्स के अंदर. नाज़रीन, आसियान स्टेट्स की तरफ से मिक्स रिएक्शन आ रहे हैं, विच इज़ वेरी अनप्रेसिडेंटेड कंसिडरिंग द काइंड ऑफ इंटीग्रेशन दैट आसियान हैज़ डेवलप्ड ओवर द पीरियड ऑफ टाइम. Indonesia and Malaysia has expressed their concerns, not grave concerns, but they have expressed their concerns that this agreement is likely to create an arms race and a possible nuclear proliferation in the region. On the other hand, Philippines, for example, it has been welcoming this agreement because Philippines think that greater Australian role will help stabilize the region. So ASEAN is split on that as well, but the key states of ASEAN are Indonesia and Malaysia, the two largest and the two strongest economies of ASEAN, and their reaction shows that they were also caught off guard of this agreement, and therefore they will develop some differences with the United States and Australia in that policy of containment of Chinese. Another major concern about this agreement is the threat to nuclear non-proliferation. नाज़रीन, बहुत सारे scholars, including the Western scholars, have been expressing their concern that this agreement, under which US will provide sensitive nuclear technology to Australia, and there are some reports that suggest that this submarine will be powered by not low enriched uranium, but rather high enriched uranium, and therefore it would make Australia much steps closer to develop nuclear weapons if it desires so, although Australia is a signatory of NPT, Non-Proliferation Treaty, and has also been the signatory of the CTBT, Comprehensive Test Ban Treaty of 1990s. But there are concerns that with this growing nuclear expertise in Australia, will be a concern in the region and it might have a domino effect. And in this regard, नाज़रीन, न्यूजीलैंड की तरफ से कहा गया that it will not allow a nuclear armed submarine within its maritime boundaries. ईरान के बारे में नाज़रीन कहा गया, different articles were written on that as well, that the possibility is that this deal will ease pressure on Iran. Iran could claim at international forums, and it has been claiming since then, that if Australia can be trusted with such a sensitive nuclear technology, Iran is not having any ambition to develop nuclear weapons. And Iran is also the signatory of NPT. And therefore, why is so much pressure on Iran? On the other hand, there is a real possibility that it will also trigger nuclear arms race in the region. China, for its part, for example, is likely to advance its nuclear weapons capabilities by fearing that Australia might also acquire nuclear weapons. So नाज़रीन, एक रीजन के अंदर कन्वेंशनल आर्म्स रेस की प्रोबेबिलिटी तो बढ़ेगी, बट न्यूक्लियर प्रोलिफरेशन की प्रोबेबिलिटीज भी बढ़ने के चांसेस ज़्यादा हों. एंड लास्ट मेजर इम्पैक्ट could be on Quad in general and particularly India. Naazreen, this agreement, although was not officially meant to replace Quad, but some scholars suggested that US is not so happy with the Quad states and they have been complaining about lack of proactive strategy to contain China. Or in other words, US has not a complete trust on the Quad states and they are likely to trust the English-speaking territories of the region, that is Australia and obviously UK and United States. So the future of Quad seems to be uncertain in the sense that it apparently seems that Quad is no longer the top priority of the Biden administration anymore. Although Biden was the first president of the United States who proposed the first summit of the Quad that was held in March this year. But this AUKUS agreement has overshadowed the strategic significance and the role of Quad in Indo-Pacific region. However, as the time goes on, it will be more evident whether US keeps a balance between Quad and AUKUS or it shifts its focus from Quad to AUKUS. And because of this uncertainty about Quad, there are certain Indian quarters who have also seen this development as not so good for Indian interests. Multiple reasons हैं नाज़रीन उसकी. उसे एक रीज़न ये है that currently India is the only state of the IOR, Indian Ocean region, to have nuclear powered submarine. However, with Australia joining the club, India would not be able to claim its monopoly over the nuclear submarine technologies. And secondly, the Indian concern is based on the fact that India was not consulted on such a significant development of the Indo-Pacific region, where India was considered to be the most significant and important ally of the United States. So although not officially expressed, but certain Indian scholars have expressed their surprise and concern about US decision without consulting India. So नाज़रीन, अगर हम इस डिस्कशन को कंक्लूड करें तो हम कह सकते हैं कि जो AUKUS की अलायंस है, ऑस्ट्रेलिया यूके यूएस अलायंस, दिस अलायंस विल हैव मेजर शॉर्ट टर्म एंड लॉन्ग टर्म इम्पैक्ट्स not only for Indo-Pacific region but also for the global politics. और नाज़रीन, जो मेजर कंसर्न्स हैं इस इशू के वजह से वो ये नहीं है हाउ द एडवर्सरीज ऑफ दी स्टेट सी इट, it is also how their allies see it, like France and India, Malaysia, Indonesia, etc. And that is why a lot of scholars believe that Biden have been following the footpath of Trump by not only making its enemies more enemies, but it is also turning its allies into enemies. आज के लिए नाज़रीन इतना ही. Keep watching the Fortnightly glance. Do give your feedback in the comment section, and do see one liner at the end of this video. Thank you so much. God bless you and be safe.